Very good afternoon, everyone. There isn't any kind of doubt that if men live alone and without code of manners and ethics, life together would be terribly hell or living hell. Now the question is, if we are already living with code of manners and ethics, then why we need to have distinct code of manners and ethics or different kind of set of different code of manners and ethics for research scholar? Now it again leads us to another question, and that is scholar's life is different from others or it is actually supposed to be different from others? Now, if our answer is obviously yes, then let's try to get the answers through this presentation. And we'll briefly touch upon the points that importance and need of the code of manners and ethics, then scholars code of manners and ethics working together for the benefits of society, not for the private aggrandizement, then all knowledge in public domain, then property rights should be respected, then purpose. Another noteworthy, there are several code of manners and ethics. We'll discuss that also. And a scholar must not contravene the very spirit of scholarship. Now, if we jump to the importance and need of code of manners and ethics, then if we justify it or if we define it in general, then we can say as uh, MC Cartney defines it in the importance of ethical behavior. That is, ethics is like almost everything else that we strive to be good at, and it requires just practice and effort. And there we can point it scholars code of manners and ethics. Richard Eldick beautifully quotes in the art of literary research that like all professions, our has its own code of manners and ethics, and the heart of which is the proposition that we are working together for the benefit of society, not for the private aggrandizement. Now again it leads to a question: how then it oops, actually I don't know how, but this slide is not clearly visible in Google slide. Sorry for the disturbance. Actually it works together for the benefit of society. It deals with the social issues in detail, which helps people to realize the truth and think it in a different view. Think it in a different view in the sense of, for example, scholars works help us to justify it's okay not to be okay. For example, if we just take a feminist approach, then there will be a kind of differentiation when critic defines any particular approach and when scholar define particular approach. Then it analyze societal issues, and sometimes, not just sometimes, but many a time it becomes a bit difficult to accept it, and that's why we are supposed to point it as sometimes it's provide us a solution to solve the problem. Then as literature records the real life events from the society and converts it into the fictional world, or and these mundane activities into the fiction. Now here scholars perform the duty to decode it and share it with the society. Then scholars endorse social well-being and to prevent or lessen social harms through the research. For example, if literature reflects society, then scholars serves a better light which guide to the people. Then it they present them to the society as a mirror in which people may look at their own images and they can make amendments if or wherever these are necessary. And uh, uh, one of the very significant point that we can also point out here, that is many time it also happens that even the most representative writers of a given time cannot express a complete picture of particular time or era of particular time or in era in which he or she is living. Now on that basis, it would lead to the idea that a writer conveys the truth and necessarily the historical and the social truth. That we know it's not so. The way it is presented, we cannot consider it as historical facts. So here also, scholar decodes this, and their roles comes into a play. Then all knowledge in public domain. Uh, LTIC mentions as scientists and technicians may have their patents, but in human, learning all knowledge is the public domain. Uh, Here, scholars are expected to publish and disseminate the result of their research in open, honest, transparent, and in accurate manners, and via all appropriate media such as journals, papers, books, reviews, and data repository or conference proceedings. But it should be in a public domain. uh, when we are discussing this, property rights should be respected and all knowledge in a public domain. I found very interesting lines from the selected writings of Thomas Jefferson. He mentions as if he who receives an idea from me receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at mine receives light without darkening me. So the idea should freely spread from one to another over the globe for the moral and mutual instruction of a man and improvement of his condition. Seems to have been peculiarity and benevolently designed by the nature, like fire, expansible over all space without lessening their density any point, and like the air in which we breathe, move, and have our physical being, incapable of confinement or exclusive appropriation. Sorry again, I don't know why, but again, it's this slide is not clearly visible in Google slide. Now, what's the purpose of property rights for the research scholar? Now, this any small piece of research is the product of innovative, diligent, and creative and intellectual effort. So it should be tagged as, or it is intellectual property. So first and foremost thing that foremost thing for the scholars, that is to share credits and courtesy, obviously. Then scholars are required to familiarize themselves with strictly and observe the terms and conditions relating to and confidentiality in any research, grant, contract, or any collaboration. Second thing we can point out here, that is they are supposed to record their path so others can use it as previous scholars property. And then their scholars are expected to respect property created by others and use it only with appropriate permissions and fully complete with all relevant credits and courtesy. There are some of the noteworthy, we can point out codes of manners and ethics, which is mentioned by LTIC in Art of Literary Research, that differences of opinions, there will always be lapses of judgment, and imperfection of knowledge will sometimes call for a comment. Otherwise, literary study would stagnate, complacent in its intellectual lethargy and spotted with uncorrected errors. So, but with this necessary process of debate and correction can and should be conducted with dignity and courtesy. And with this also, even if there is a controversy or dilemma or crisis, controversial point can be made effectively and adequately without betraying the ancient association of scholarship uh, with gentlemanliness. And the last, of course, but not of the least, that scholar must not contrave the very spirit of scholarship, because very essential thing is scholar must not seize up of being scholar himself or herself. A scholar can lock the door at the end of the day. Scholar can keep herself or himself behind the door, can have can make the self apart from, but he cannot uh, he or she cannot apart the self from the research itself, or squeezes from his intellectual quest, or the he may can have the thought of, or he may have the idea even at any sort of odd time, whether the scholar is taking a bath or eating or doing nothing or doing the very important thing. So scholar must not contrive the very spirit of scholarship that is at the center. So that much can freely be consigned to him as fortunate or ingenious discoverer. But if he simply sits on his claim indefinitely, meanwhile refusing to let other more energetic scholar mine it, he is contravening the very spirit of scholarship. So these are the references, and thank you very much, friends. And once again, sorry for my inconvenience that two slides are not clearly visible there. Yes.
I have a question. What are some of the aspects of manners that can contribute to the intellectual growth of a scholar?
Can you please just repeat it?
What are some of the aspects of manners
Okay.
that can lead to the intellectual growth of a scholar?
So, what are the some of the
Manners.
manners? For example, code of manners. Then, uh, let's take an example that scroll. Just a second. Just a second. I can show it. Uh, no worries. It's still in that slide only, so it might not be visible there. Um, but set of manners. For example, researcher is collecting several data and putting this into the research. Then there are distinct rules that particular researcher is supposed to follow it. Then, but still, what happens? For example, uh, uh, but particular scholar is mentioning, or guide has asked to scholar that you are supposed to collect the ethics. Then now guide is answering by looking the answers that it is not supposed to be there. Their answer is supposed to be different, but it's a kind of joke actually. But the scholar is answering as if it cannot be wrong. Now a supervisor can ask how it's not wrong, how you can come to know it's not wrong, and the answer is I have already googled it. So we can differentiate it. Actually it is not the manner of research scholar. So I hope, if not completely, but I have tried slightest of it. Another?
Yes,
Yes.
I would like to ask a question that throws some light on scientific temperament of a research scholar, because some of the things are accepted as the ritual, or some of the things are accepted as our long tradition. So at that time, what must be the scientific temperament of its research scholar to fight against those kinds of rituals and traditions?
When it comes to mind and temperament of research scholar, so for example, research scholar, we have a tradition. No, for nowadays we are in this 21st century. uh, for example, we can use the line from uh, white tiger, that we live in two, there are two India, dark and light. Then so research when it comes to the particular feminist approach, so even if we even if the majority of this major part of the society, or the major, even if the other critics or majority critics are also defining that we are not in a kind of need where we need to have feminism still, but scholar actually this is a kind of traditional norm wherein even if women are having freedom, still they don't have it. But scholars are supposed to justify it with a research, that if we just go on to if the scholar review it in general, then scholars can define or scholar can define and justify it, that even if the women are free from the particular cage or particular boundary, they are having another new boundary. Even if they want to free themselves from the particular cage, for example, if women want to do job, of course they can, we don't have any kind of boundaries. But if they want to do job, they will have to do a kind of double, they will have to manage double responsibilities. Now if we are on this stage only, then it's better to do just household work only, if you are just supposed to have the burden of two responsibilities. So in this kind of manner, mind and when it comes to mind and temperament, scholar must not believe up to any typical or any traditional norm which is being followed, but should focus on the various aspect, on the all the aspect he or she can, and then try to come up with the solution. So when it comes to the mind and temperament of research scholar, there should not be any kind of boundary, any kind of biasness, or any kind of prejudice should be there. So thank you.